The rain was falling hard that morning, turning the training ground into mud, and for most of the recruits, it only made the boot camp drills feel even harsher. Among them was Clara, a quiet woman in her early 30s who had joined the program not to chase glory, but simply to prove to herself that she could endure it. She wasn't the strongest nor the fastest. In fact, many of the others looked at her and saw someone who didn't belong. Some laughed at her mistakes. Others rolled their eyes when she stumbled during exercises. Day after day, the humiliation grew heavier, but Clara kept showing up, her determination hidden behind silence. To the officers and fellow trainees, she seemed too ordinary, too fragile, almost invisible. They didn't know the years of quiet resilience she carried, the small battles she had already fought in her life before stepping into uniform. And yet, when the instructors barked orders and the recruits pushed themselves, Clara was the one who absorbed it all without complaint. The base had become her testing ground, not just of physical strength, but of patience and courage. Then, one evening, everything changed. A routine drill was underway, but something unusual stirred in the background. Small details that most people overlooked. Clara noticed them. The subtle shift in the air, the strange movement near the storage units, the uneasy silence where there should have been chatter. No one else paid attention. Why would they? She was the one they dismissed, the one who was never taken seriously. But in that moment, Clara saw the pieces connect, and the picture they formed was alarming. Something dangerous was unfolding right under the noses of the officers and recruits. And if she was right, the entire base was at risk of disaster. Her heart pounded as she realized what she had to do. The same woman they had laughed at, the same one they thought didn't belong, was about to face a choice that could save them all, or cost her everything. What happened next would turn humiliation into heroism. But no one at boot camp was ready for what Clara was about to do. Clara's instincts were sharper than anyone realized, shaped not by military training, but by years of paying attention to the smallest details in her quiet life. Back home, she had worked in a modest job at a repair shop, noticing the faintest cracks in machinery before they became real problems. That habit of watching closely, of listening when others ignored, was something she carried with her into boot camp. It was the very thing that made her see what the others missed. The base was always busy, soldiers shouting, drills echoing, boots pounding against gravel. But that night, the noise seemed different. The rhythm of activity was off, and Clara felt it in her bones. She noticed shadows moving where they shouldn't have been and caught a faint metallic smell carried by the wind. To her, it was more than coincidence. Yet how could she explain it to people who barely believed she deserved to be there? Earlier that day, she had tripped during a march, earning sneers from the recruits who already thought she was weak. One of them even muttered that she was slowing everyone down. Clara had walked away quietly, as she always did, swallowing the sting of their words. Now, standing near the dimly lit edge of the training field, she wondered if those same voices would listen if she tried to warn them. The truth pressed heavier with every passing second. The equipment storage units were supposed to be locked, yet she had seen one door left slightly ajar. A flicker of light inside suggested movement, deliberate, careful, and wrong. Clara tightened her grip on the strap of her bag, her heart racing faster than any drill could make it. Something was waiting in the shadows, and she was the only one who seemed to notice. If she stayed silent, disaster could unfold. But if she spoke, would anyone believe her? Clara stood frozen in place, her boots sinking slightly into the damp soil as she stared at the storage unit. The dim light flickered again, like a signal that something or someone was inside. She thought back to the safety rules drilled into them during training. Every weapon, every piece of gear, every supply was supposed to be accounted for at all times. A door left open was not just careless, it was dangerous. Her mind wandered briefly to the moments that had brought her here. She had signed up for boot camp not out of ambition, but because she had always felt invisible in her own life. Growing up, she was the quiet one in her family, the person everyone overlooked. Even in the civilian world, she blended into the background. Boot camp was supposed to be her chance to step forward, to test herself. But instead, it had only deepened the feeling that she didn't belong. The louder, stronger recruits overshadowed her at every turn, and the officers rarely spoke her name unless it was to point out a mistake. But in this quiet corner of the base, away from the noise of drills and laughter around the campfires, Clara realized she was seeing something no one else had noticed. That gave her a strange fear and an unexpected strength. She crouched slightly, watching, her breath steady, even though her chest was tight with nerves. She thought she heard the faint scrape of metal from inside the unit, followed by a pause, as if whoever was inside knew they were being watched. The night air was cold, but sweat traced her temples. Clara's instincts screamed at her to act, to say something, but doubt chained her in place. What if they laughed again? What if they dismissed her warnings the way they always dismissed her presence? Still, the danger felt real, too real to ignore. Something was coming and she was standing right at the edge of it. Clara's breath quickened as she edged closer to the storage unit, every step crunching softly against the gravel. The camp was now quieter, most recruits already resting after the exhausting day. That silence made every sound sharper. The rustle of fabric, the faint thud of something heavy shifting inside the unit. She froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. Whoever was there wasn't supposed to be. Her eyes darted toward the barracks where a faint glow of light spilled from the windows. She could run, alert the officers, but she knew exactly how that would play out. They would brush her off, accuse her of being paranoid, or worse, mock her in front of everyone. But if she stayed and did nothing, whatever was unfolding could spiral into disaster. It was a terrible choice. Risk humiliation again, or risk the entire base. Her hands trembled, though she pressed them firmly against her sides, forcing herself to be still. She thought she saw a silhouette move inside, tall and deliberate, bending over crates that weren't meant to be touched. Her heart sank. Those crates contained sensitive equipment, gear that could never fall into the wrong hands. One wrong move and the entire base could be thrown into chaos. The night seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on her as if the air itself knew something dangerous was brewing. Every instinct screamed at her to back away, to vanish before she was noticed. But then she heard it. The sound of a latch snapping into place, followed by a click of metal. It wasn't just someone poking around. It was preparation, careful and deliberate, for something far worse than she had imagined. Her throat tightened as the silhouette paused, head turning ever so slightly, as if sensing her presence in the shadows. She held her breath, her body rigid, praying the darkness would keep her hidden. The next second would decide everything.
The figure inside the storage unit shifted, and for a terrifying moment, Clara thought she had been spotted. But instead of stepping out, the silhouette crouched low, pulling something from one of the crates. The faint outline of wires and a small blinking light caught her eye. Clara's stomach dropped. This wasn't just tampering with supplies. Someone was setting up something dangerous, something that could cripple the base in an instant. She pressed herself tighter against the wall, her breath shallow, fighting the urge to bolt. The thought that someone had slipped past all the guards and routines made her blood run cold. Boot camp was supposed to be tough, but safe. Yet here she was, standing just yards away from what could be an attack from the inside. Suddenly, the humiliation she had endured seemed meaningless compared to the risk looming in front of her. Then came the twist she hadn't expected. From the shadows behind her, another sound broke through the silence. A soft crunch of boots. Clara spun her head ever so slightly, her heart thundering. Someone else was there, standing just far enough away to be hidden by the night. It wasn't another recruit. The stance was different, heavier, deliberate. She realized with dread that there wasn't just one intruder. There were two. Panic clawed at her chest as she realized she was caught between them. One inside, preparing something with deadly precision. Another outside, closing in on her without a word. Clara was trapped in the middle, the invisible recruit suddenly standing at the very center of a plot no one else had seen coming. Her mind raced. Should she confront them? Should she run and risk being heard? Every option seemed impossible. But one thing was certain. The danger was bigger than she imagined, and she was now right in the middle of it. The base had no idea of the storm about to hit, and Clara was the only one standing in its path. Clara's pulse roared in her ears as the second set of footsteps grew closer. She knew she had only seconds to act. With a deep breath, she did the one thing no one would have expected from her. She stepped out of the shadows. Her voice trembled, but it was loud enough to slice through the night. "Stop what you're doing!" she shouted. The figure inside the storage unit whipped around, startled. The wires in his hand slipped, clattering against the metal crate. The second intruder froze as well, caught off guard by the sudden defiance of someone they had never considered a threat. Clara didn't wait for their reaction. She lunged for the alarm switch mounted on the wall, slamming her hand against it. The base erupted in sirens, red lights flashing across the compound. Chaos followed instantly. Guards poured out from the barracks, officers barking commands as floodlights cut through the darkness. The two intruders bolted in opposite directions, but there was no longer any escape. Within minutes, they were surrounded and tackled to the ground. Clara stood motionless, her body shaking as the recruits who had once mocked her watched in stunned silence. As the officers secured the saboteurs, Clara noticed something strange. One of the captured men wasn't a stranger at all. He was a senior officer, someone respected, someone trusted. The realization chilled her. This wasn't just an outside attack. It was a betrayal from within. That was the true reason no one else had noticed the danger. The threat had been hiding in plain sight all along. The base was safe, but the revelation left everyone unsettled. Clara, the woman who had been humiliated and underestimated, had not only saved the base, but uncovered a truth that shook the very foundation of their trust. And as the night settled back into silence, one question hung heavily in the air. If a leader could betray them, what else was waiting in the shadows? The sirens finally faded, leaving behind a heavy quiet that seemed almost unreal after the chaos. Clara stood there, her uniform smeared with dirt, her hands still trembling from the rush of it all. Around her, recruits whispered in disbelief, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The woman they had mocked only hours ago had saved the entire base from disaster. The officers questioned her, asking how she had noticed what no one else did. Clara answered simply and honestly. She had paid attention when others didn't. Her quiet nature, the very thing that made her seem out of place, had become her greatest strength. It was a moment that turned every smirk, every insult, into something hollow. Those who once doubted her now looked at her with respect they had never shown before. In the days that followed, the base uncovered the full truth. The captured officer had been secretly working with outside contacts, planning to sabotage the training grounds and cripple operations. Without Clara's courage and sharp instincts, the consequences would have been devastating. Her actions not only protected the base, but exposed a betrayal that could have spread far deeper. Clara didn't boast, and she didn't seek praise. She returned to her drills the very next morning, her head held a little higher, not because she wanted recognition, but because she finally knew she belonged. The recruits trained alongside her differently now. No more laughter at her mistakes, no more whispers behind her back. They understood she had earned her place, not through brute strength, but through courage, vigilance, and heart. The lesson lingered long after the incident. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Sometimes, the person you least expect is the one who holds the strength to change everything. Clara had proved that true. Heroics often come from the simplest of souls.